It's the first sleigh and the bestest sleigh. And it is so sleigh today. Yes, everybody sleighing like a queen. Yes, everybody sleigh, sleigh. Everybody sleigh, sleigh. Everybody sleigh, sleigh. Everybody sleigh, sleigh. Besties is all sleighing like a queen. Lots of yachts, queens sleigh. Everybody go sashay away. Yes, everybody sleigh, sleigh. Everybody slay, slay.
Welcome to Everybody Slay Slay. You have me, your host, Sam. Any pronouns, twitch.tv/Twickerist.
Oh, okay.
Find me. I stream on there totally.
Okay. It's true. Mm-hmm.
I'll go next. I'm, I guess Carter. They, them pronouns, and you can find me at twitch.tv/Twiggerist.
Oh my I will go next. Hi, I'm Wilbur. They, them pronouns. You can find me on Twitter at plantwill, WIL, or you can find me at twitch.tv/Twiggerist. Oh my god.
Okay, I guess, hi, I'm Leggy. I use any pronouns, and you can find me at twitch.tv/plantwill.
Yeah! And Twiggerist!
No, I never heard of them.
Oh. That's awkward.
Okay, hi, I'm Becky. My pronouns are they, she, and you cannot find me anywhere.
Nice!
Alright, I'll go next. My name is Lauren. I use any pronouns. And I am like Becky. I have no presence whatsoever.
You could say
Amazing.
You're not found. Sad.
No.
Oh my god.
No.
Lauren not found. But I'm not George, I'm Rambu.
Right. Anyway, so, speaking of gay.
Great segue there.
This is going so bad.
Speaking of people that are homosexual.
Yeah, speaking of people who are homosexual, as you have previously stated, what do you guys think are common misconceptions about gender and or sexual identities?
I think a misconception about specifically being non-binary is that you have to look or act androgynous, which I feel like that comes from both outside of the LGBT community and inside of the LGBT community. People still aren't like super familiar with they, them pronouns, even within the community. So when you say like, hey, I'm not a girl or a guy, that, you know, identify as something kind of in between or neither, they're kind of like, okay, so you dress / act / look like someone in between. And that's not always the case. So that would be one misconception I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one misconception about non-binary people as well is that all of them use they, them pronouns. They can't use any other pronouns, which is obviously not true.
Yeah, I feel like this thought is really still rooted in like the heteronormative thought, because especially in the gender roles, because people are still thinking of like there's just a specific gender binary, like that they just kind of discovered non-binary people just recently, which really isn't the case. It doesn't work like that.
No, gender is something that is like your role in culture, right? Like your role into society. Like that's what it more refers to. Like you have your sex, which is your literal chromosomes, right? What you were born with. And then, but gender is used more culturally, and there are some cultures that have more than two. And so the fact that people think that non-binary is something new and trendy and like people just want to be different, they're wrong. They clearly haven't done their research.
Yeah. Another thing is, like for binary trans people, I know that there's sometimes a lot of like, if you're a gay trans man, cis people are like, why can't you just be a straight girl? And if you're a lesbian trans woman, they assume like, why can't you just be a straight man? So there is that.
Yeah, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of nuances and subtleties within the community that if you haven't experienced it yourself, you can never really truly understand. And a lot of people, if they don't understand it, they don't accept it. And that's, even if you don't completely understand what another person is going through, you can still be supportive and accepting. And that's something that people don't see and implement into their lives.
People also seem to always tie gender and sexuality together, and thinking that like, oh, your sexuality has to correlate to your gender and vice versa. I think they can be two separate things. Like I know with what Paiint was saying, people think that like, oh, gay, trans men should just be, straight, girls or whatever you said. But like, gender is its own thing. Like maybe someone, maybe their sexuality isn't the only thing they're thinking of. Like maybe they didn't transition because they want to be a gay man. Maybe they transitioned because they want to be a man in general. And their sexuality just reflects that.
Yeah, exactly. They're two separate aspects of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
They don't always correlate in the way that people want it to.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on from that, what do you guys think is problematic with current representation? Because like we all know that it's very limited in what is shown and how accurate experiences can be. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah. One of the things that I've noticed, especially a lot lately with like, as media gets more comfortable, adding like queer characters to like TV shows and movies and whatever, is they seem to feel like there's a limit where it's like you can only have like one or two queer characters in a show and like that's it. When in reality, queer people often sort of find each other, whether it's intentional or unintentional.
Yeah, if there's one queer person, there's probably like 5 nearby.
There will be more.
We group together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I seen that specifically a lot in the Stranger Things.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I think that's what you're referring to.
Thinking.
Yeah, people seem to think that since, Robin and Will are queer, that means no one else can be queer, which that's not how it works. And also just, even now in media, like, there's the trope of like, oh, you kill off the gay person, the one gay person dies. I still see that all the time. And it's like, haven't we gone past that? Or like the only character that will die will be the queer character. Yeah. And it's like, hey, or like the show I was watching today, my partner and I were watching the Resident Evil show that just came out. The only queer person is evil and is leading up the evil organization.
Yeah.
And that just kind of feels like a slap in the face. Like, yeah, it's representation, but it's representation that's negative, like saying like, oh, queer people, are just gonna die, or like queer people are evil and we're portraying them as evil. It's just not helpful and it's not constructive, and it's just gonna make homophobes reinforce their own bad views.
Yeah. Especially
it's like
with,
they're, sorry, you go.
Oh yeah. Just with bury your gays, like, especially like now in like, cause after nobody's gonna do it like Supernatural. They did that trope the best. Nobody should ever be trying to top that. Like, we can move on from that.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to fulfill their, their diversity quota without actually building an important character, like without actually, taking any of the risk or anything, because they're like, oh, look, a gay person. Oh, they're gone now. You're welcome, guys. And it's also, it kind of reminds me of how women used to be portrayed in, like, in the media, and they still are, but I'm thinking more like ancient, like Greece and stuff, how the woman is always like the villain, and they're always like super villainized, and that's basically the only whenever there's like a strong female character in like a Greek myth or whatever, she's almost always the villain. Like I'm thinking Medusa, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we're seeing kind of like a repeat with that with the queer representation in modern media.
But it's all feeding into a lot of stereotypes as well, because all the representation that you see, all of them, you know, are like thin, they're white, they are, you know, just generally you think of, you know, what people would think when you say, oh, you know, a gay man.
Yeah, they're like the most socially acceptable version of queer people.
Exactly. Yep. Because I think a lot of it comes from, you know, there has to be a man and a woman in a relationship. You know, you think of a lesbian, you'd expect somebody who is, you know, masculine, or a gay man that's feminine. You know, it's feeding into that, again, heteronormativity. And I think I would like to see less of that in the media. And I think the way we go against those stereotypes, well, the way we can, you know, kind of normalize, I'm so sorry. My brain is everywhere today.
It's fine.
Hang on, let me find my notes. I made notes.
Oh.
I'd like to see some representation of, you know, lesbians being more feminine, and, you know, even outside of the female gender binary. Because there is almost zero genderqueer lesbian representation.
Yeah.
And again, I think my brain's gone. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
No, I agree with you. Yeah, I'm a genderqueer lesbian myself, and yeah, it's frustrating to just see all this heteronormativity pushed on to any lesbian like representation you see, and any like how do you say MLM?
Yep. Yeah.
MLM. It's frustrating, and I think a way that we can like fix that is try to perpetuate like queer writers and stuff, because when they are in like the screenwriting room or whatever, when they're the ones writing the stories and when they're the ones thinking up the characters, this is usually way less of a problem, you know? Like there's usually
Yep. And just, I'm begging of writers and directors, if you're writing a queer story, hang out with queer people, have queer friends, get, get input, like, know, like, be around queer people. Like, I'm a firm believer of you shouldn't write what you don't know. And if you don't know queer people, how are you going to write a queer story? The best queer media that has come out in the last couple years has been by queer writers, because they understand and they're in the community and they can portray accurately.
Exactly. I think another really big issue with like how people see the queer community and how they're represented in the media is the sexualization. You know, like 100%. anything that's not cis het is immediately like kind of, I don't want to say vulgar, but like, you know, like they exaggerate it and they make it seem gross and unnatural, kind of. Yeah. And that's, just the way, because, you know, when someone's like, when a little kid is like, oh, I have a crush on, like a little boy is like, oh, I have a crush on this girl, you know, like society and their parents would be like, oh, that's so cute, like, or they'll even force it on them, like a little boy hangs out with a little girl and they're like, oh, is that your girlfriend, you know? But the minute like a little kid even thinks about having a crush on like the same gender or questions their gender, it's gross and weird. And I know that's like standard homophobia, but the sexuality has definitely like the sexualization of queer people has definitely made itself clear in the media, and it's very frustrating.
One more thing about media representation is that a lot of times, like again, Stranger Things, for the longest time, and I get that this was for the plot and stuff, but how up until like the end of season 4, all that the writers and the actors would say was that Will's sexuality was being like left up to people's interpretation.
Yep.
And I know that they could only say that because they're trying to have like this drawn out realistic. So like it's okay in that case because they were able to turn it around and it wasn't queer baiting. But so many times shows just do that and then they don't like wrap it up and actually explicitly say that a character is queer. And so then it's just queer baiting so that they can string along their queer audience while not losing their homophobic audience.
Yeah. I think it's about having that deniability as well about the character's queerness.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Also, hot take, at Marvel, having one character mention, in the past having a girlfriend is not representation. That's just acknowledging that queer people exist.
True.
Yeah. So true. So true. I've decided if the character doesn't have like a substantial effect on the plot, and you know, like it's not representation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of already touched on it, but to go more in depth, how do you think someone can represent gender or sexual identities realistically with minimal overlap with stereotypes?
I think the way to represent identities at the moment without adhering to any kind of stereotypes is to actually go against like the current stereotype and just show that, you know, anybody can be queer. Like, again, right now, you think of stereotypes the moment somebody mentions queerness. And, you know, I want characters that are, characters that are outside of those stereotypes, you know, like, give us, like, the plus-size characters, give us the POC characters, you know?
Yep.
And obviously, oh, sorry, go.
No, you're good. I was just agreeing, yeah.
Oh, disagreeing, okay. Obviously, stereotypes do, like, come from somewhere. And so there are going to be characters and people in real life that do adhere to some stereotypes. So I don't think we need to, like, you know, because some of it is accurate representation, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And we don't need to, like, completely deny everything, but definitely having more of that, like more of the what's outside of those stereotypes, because the queer community has, like the open queer community has definitely grown a lot in the past few years, and we need to show that, and it's not just, you know, what people automatically think.
Yeah.
It's so much more.
I know this has already been said before, but I think that really for representation, they just need to like talk to queer people and as well as cast queer people, because there are so many queer people who do not fall into stereotypes, and then there are some who as well do. But you can cast these queer people and you can talk to them, and you'll find so much more than just the baseline stereotypes.
Yeah. If one more like straight, like if one more cis het or just even cis actor gets casted to play a trans person, like a cis man getting casted to play a trans woman, I'm going to lose it. I can't do that. My patience for that is just so low.
Yeah,
it keeps happening.
Yeah,
like
it's like
not so much anymore, but it used to be such a big problem. And it's like there are trans actors out there. They're not hard to find.
Yeah. It's kind of like what I was saying before. Like, if you haven't experienced it yourself, you're not really going to understand it. And while you can still promote like acceptance and love, you aren't going to be able to really speak on it, you know?
Yeah, you should never be speaking firsthand on something you have not experienced yourself.
Yeah. And I think it's also up to, like, you know, the actors as well, to deny, you know, there's going to be studios out there that still want to employ straight cisgender people.
Yeah.
And I think it's up to the actors as well to say no to taking on those roles. Because I know, I think recently Eddie Redmayne came out and said, hey, like, I shouldn't have taken this role. I acknowledge that now. And I think that's really important to, recognizing that it wasn't his role to take. And, you know, he said if he could go back and, you know, not take the role, then he would. And I think that's really important to, to getting good representation in media.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We love growth.
We do.
Definitely, obviously we don't want to be like making those mistakes in the first place, you know?
Yeah.
But if more people would like mature and see their mistakes in the past and like apologize and better themselves and not be so stubborn, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And like actually look around.
Yeah. I think it's really important. Yeah, it's really important to have an environment where people like in the queer community where we're ready to acknowledge like those kinds of past mistakes from people, so that if those mistakes are like accepted and like not forgiven but like acknowledged, and if like we are able to make our peace with the actors who did that stuff, then yeah, I feel like it'll be easier to avoid in the future.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, changing and growing is definitely something that we need to advocate. It's a big thing in the queer community itself, changing and growing and like learning more about yourself. And we need to do that the same thing with acceptance and representation, and even people outside the queer community need to be doing that too.
Yeah, because people can like change and grow and learn better. Like some people were just raised in environments where they weren't allowed to know anything else besides their ignorance. So like, you know, let people grow and learn. And, you know, if they're not willing to grow and learn, that's one thing. But if they're wanting to and they're wanting to change their behavior and like educate themselves, then that's fantastic. And what they did in the past was shitty. But as long as they admit that, like, you know.
I did grow up in a like traditionally conservative Christian home, and I was not like exposed to like the queer community at all until literally the first experience I had was reading Percy Jackson and when Nico was gay in Percy Jackson.
That was such a defining moment for me.
Yeah, right? And because it was so new to me and because I had been taught to like, you know, kind of reject anything new, I was homophobic in middle school. Like I wasn't like rude or mean, but I was like, oh, gay people kind of make me uncomfortable. Like I don't want to be around that. But as I became more and more curious, and this might be because I am queer myself, and I just didn't know at the time, I was able to do my own research and like stopped listening to my parents about what they had to say, and like do my own research and educate myself and educate my siblings and stuff, so that so now I'm obviously like I know a lot about the queer community and I've learned a lot about myself. And again, that the reason I was able to do that like so young and so quickly might be because I am queer myself. But people, even people outside of the queer community who were raised in that kind of environment, they definitely have the resources and the capabilities to do that research and to, you know, like get over themselves, you know?
Yeah. I was also raised extremely conservative Christian, in the deep South. I was lucky enough to realize I was gay from like a pretty early age. 'Cause I was like, yes, girls. But I definitely was like transphobic and like a little racist and stuff in like elementary or middle school before I got access to the internet, funnily enough. And like, oh wait, these are not the only beliefs, because I grew up in a almost exclusive like homeschool community as well. I never went to school, so the only beliefs that I literally ever had like exposure to were conservative, homophobic, transphobic beliefs.
Yeah, you're like secluded from anything different.
Exactly. So I see people like content creators or whatever who have had similar upbringings as mine and who are like learning and growing, and sometimes a bunch of like teenagers will, you know, not let them. So like
not naming names of content creators or anything, but
yeah, but like, you know, just I'm sure there's multiple, to be honest with you, but like just like allowing people who had bad upbringings to like grow and like, you know, create communities and create new experiences and beliefs and stuff is good. Cause like I can assure you that all of us did shitty stuff as like young people.
Oh yeah.
like, I do not know a single person who's not said or done something shitty as a young person. So, like, just
It's part of growing.
Exactly. So just being able to, like, grow and learn, which I feel like sometimes both within the community and outside of the community, there's so much pressure to be perfect and know everything all the time that, like,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to exist as a queer person, and you're not allowed to exist outside of the queer community because everyone just expects you to be perfect from within the community, and, you know, the homophobia from outside the community is its own thing. So
obviously people with similar beliefs and experiences are gonna, like, tend to hang out together more and flock together. And while obviously that is a problem outside of the queer community, you know, with people, you know, Christians only hang out with Christians and they only talk about, and, like, they're never, what's the word, exposed to anything else. It's also kind of a problem within the queer community. Like, especially with, like, because, you know, there are gay transphobic people. Stuff like that. Like, they only hang out with gay people. There's exclusionists. There's all these things. And then there's people, like, obviously it's funny to, like, jokingly hate on straight people, you know? But, you know, it is a little bit of a problem.
I just, like, we don't want people to hate on us because we're gay. Like, hating someone just because they're straight is also not really appropriate. Like, if they're homophobic, hate them because they're homophobic, not because they're straight.
Yeah. No, I just mean, like, the I'm mostly talking about the, like, within the community, you know, people being like, gay people being transphobic, or, like, binary trans people being non-binary, like, hating or not, like, supporting non-binary people and stuff like that.
You are correct. Yes, I agree with you.
So you mentioned streamers earlier. Someone did. I forgot who. So kind of building off that with, like, the different ways social media, like, just media in general, is consumed and created. How does representation change between those different forms? Like, is there a specific type of, like, way something needs to be represented? God.
Like,
represented.
I'm raising my hand IRL right now. I think that it's really interesting how different types of media represent, like, the queer community. Like, for, like, video games, it's like, I don't know, the example that I can think of is, like, in Undertale, like, the playable character is non-binary, and it's just, like, that's just, like, a thing, and it's not pointed out. And how in, like, children, like, the Owl House, which is a kids show, does a really good job of, like, normalizing queer identities and, like, having a non-binary character having queer relationships and everything, and not, like, otherizing LGBT people. I think that's really good to have in, like, media that's geared towards kids and that's child friendly, because it's, like, it showcases kind of, like, the good parts of being queer, like the happy parts, and, like, obviously being queer is, like, very multifaceted, but I think that for little kids it's super important to see that being queer is a good thing, and it's a thing that can be fun and that you can love being. And then with more adult media being able to explore, like, the other side of that kind of, and, like, the struggles in more depth with, like, homophobia, coming out, like, sex and sexuality through a queer lens, etc., stuff like that. I think when done right, different medias can be utilized to help represent in different ways that are all equally important. And then to bring it back, sorry, I'm talking so much, but to bring it back to streamers, I think, honestly, that is, we went so wrong with humanity to have people have such a large audience, not because, like, they're gonna do anything bad, but, like, I just feel like it can be stressful to have your identity on display for so much. And I think that since, like, I mean, like, the digital age is still relatively new. I think we have a lot of exploring to do of how to navigate that safely and basically, just be a little nicer to each other because it's hard to figure out your identity, and it's even harder when you have hundreds of thousands of people watching you do it.
Yeah, I agree with that one.
Yes.
I think there's also I don't think dichotomy is the word I'm thinking of. Oh boy, which word was I thinking of? I know a lot with queer kids television, people get so upset about it, which because I think a lot of non-queer people view anything LGBT as inherently sexual. Yeah. But Paiint mentioned, usually in kids shows, queer content is very tame. It's very discovering yourself, like Steven Universe, for example. There's nothing really sexual in that, or the Owl House. It's just about figuring out your identity. It's a cute little love story, but apparently because it's queer, it's inherently sexual. But I think they take shows, maybe Orange is the New Black, which has a lot of lesbian sexuality and sex expressed in it. And they assume that is the only form of queer representation in media. And then they just assume that's going to be everywhere. But there's really different tiers of the experience. Just like with straight relationships, and you're not going to have, as much sex and sexuality or any in a kid show as you are in an adult show, but people don't seem to understand that differentiation also applies to queer media, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
We don't want to be putting sexual content into kid shows. So that's not our agenda. We just want them to be able to grow up and feel safe and comfortable about themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's queer media, queer representation in media is very objectified. A kind of recent example was Glee. That show was horrendous.
Yeah.
The worst.
It was, yeah. It really enforced the thought of having a gay best friend.
Yeah, I think in my tier of worst to best queer media, I'd say mainstream media like Hollywood, shows that actually go on TV are probably the worst with queer representation. And then there's probably shows like Netflix shows or streaming platforms are a little better. And then stuff directly made by individual people and content creation and stuff like that is usually the best, because when you get down to content creation, it's individual people who have individual experiences who are able to accurately portray their individual struggles and challenges. And, a lot of people are queer. And I feel like people forget that there are a lot of queer people. It's not just two.
Going off of that too is Hollywood casting, going back to the point earlier, casting straight people as gay characters. I remember Darren Criss, who played Blaine in Glee. He was praised for being so brave to play a gay man.
Yeah.
Yep.
Why does a guy have to be brave to play a character that doesn't even represent him?
Yeah.
I think a lot of writers and studios and stuff just want the brownie points for having queer characters and stuff when they're not queer characters really.
No.
Yeah.
It's again the previous point, you have to appeal to, the queer community and also, the homophobic community, which is
we love appealing to the homophobic community, all the homophobic stans.
I love being gay, but not too much.
Yeah, but not too much. Just a normal amount.
Just a little dabble.
Yeah, an amount that's acceptable societally.
So just make sure they still follow the gender binary and they're not too gay. If they die at the end, even better.
Yeah, then they should die at the end.
And if it's women loving women, absolutely not. Get that out of here. We do not want it.
It can only be the most generic of straight white men loving the most generic of straight white men. Or I guess not straight, cis white men.
Yeah.
I said gay and then straight. No.
Yeah. And one's got to be pretty masculine and the other has to be extremely feminine, the most feminine man ever.
The other one has to be a twink, just a full twink.
Yeah.
Literally.
And that's all the representation you get.
Exactly. Or they have to be cowboys in the middle of nowhere and then they go back to their wives at the end. Because, that's how that works.
And they also gotta be on a mountain or something.
Oh, yeah, just
it might be broke back or whatever,
Yeah, someone's back got broken. I don't really know what happened.
Oh, God. I've never seen this movie in my life.
Me neither. Have I. We all just know when you come out as queer, you're just instilled this information.
Oh yeah, just somehow Jake Gyllenhaal's there too. Don't forget that.
Oh yeah, it's in the debriefing.
Anyway, going to a little bit more of a serious type of conversation with very based in research. All right. So there's this term and a theory called intersectionality. It's a theory that is made by Crenshaw that really just explains a framework on how intersecting identities, be it sexuality, gender, race, class, tie into privilege and oppression in society, or anywhere in particular. In what ways do you think this theory can help or harm progress in representing queerness?
I think one of the ways that it helps is, okay, so speaking from perspectives that I know a little bit about, is the intersectionality of the queer community and the working class. 'Cause I feel like, especially in Western society and especially in America, the working class is very divided, and sort of every marginalized identity has become grouped off into their own very separate community. And I think that, and so there's all these legislation and stuff being passed against queer people, and stuff that will harm queer identities. And it's very hard to kind of fight for your entire community when the community, there's a lot more queer people now than there, out queer people now than there used to be. But it's in the grant, we're not the majority by any means. And so to have to sort of fight for our community, just us, is a very difficult thing to do. And so I think intersectionality can really help with that. And just the whole concept of there being strength in numbers.
I agree with that. Yeah. It having an understanding of a framework of how intersecting identities intersect. It's it gives another view that I feel media needs to reflect, because you've seen so many intersections of I don't know, sexuality and probably a little bit of class too, because a lot of the queer characters we see are middle class, but we don't really see lower class representation or even much queer representation of people who are of color. A lot of it is just a lot of the gay characters are just gay white guys. And occasionally the one or two lesbians, right? So I feel intersectionality, understanding that theory could kind of help in getting a new perspective that could more accurately represent a larger group of queer people.
Yes.
So true and based of me. Thank you.
Yeah. I also think that just in a socioeconomic and just in a just how the current world is going, the people who are in marginalized communities or who are discriminated against or have the potential to be discriminated against by the government, should start recognizing intersectionality. I can't speak. More, and just kind of tearing down those boundaries between us, because when it gets to the point where it's going to be the conservative, straight, white majority versus people of color and queer people and poor people, we need to be on the same page. and not, view each other as so different as I think we do now.
I definitely agree with that.
I feel like not enough people understand or even know what intersectionality is, or even just like how intersecting identities work. Like, I can't even think of another word to describe it other than intersect. But like how different identities like intersect in different spheres, like the political sphere and social, cultural spheres. Like, I feel like it's not widely, it's not understood well enough, or if at all, in the majority of people, that I don't really see how it could like harm progress in representing queerness.
Yeah.
Because like I also like adding to that, we're already limited in representing queerness as it is. Yeah, there's my 2 cents.
Good 2 cents.
Thank you. I feel like it was almost $2. It was just that much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dollars.
£2, totally. As they say.
There we are.
Does anyone else have any points? I'm looking at you, Leggy. Does anyone else have any points that they want to share?
Let me look at my notes.
You just want Leggy to speak.
I do.
We all do.
I always do.
That's a little homosexual of you. Oh my god.
OMG.
I know we're talking about being gay, but damn.
OMG. Are you about to kiss into Uber right now?
Oh my god.
Ayo.
OMG.
Asking them questions about gender and sexuality just to hear them speak, that's a little...
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
People shy.
Oh god. What's going on in this Zoom call right now?
Well, that is all for today's podcast. Thank you for coming to Everybody Slay Slay. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for hosting.
This is simply episode 1 of very, very many episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
With this exact group of people. Am I right, gang?
Yeah, clearly.
Alright, cool. Goodbye.
Everybody slay, slay. Slay, 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 slay. Slay, 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 slay. Slay, 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 slay. Everybody slay, slay.